The Doom the Dark Ages controversy is appalling. There's been a lot of discussion around Doom the Dark Ages lately, and for good reason. It's a rare kind of release in 2025, one that bucks many of the dominant trends in modern Western AAA game development. Rather than chasing live service models, multiplayer hooks, or ongoing monetization, it offers a complete single-player experience with a clear beginning and end. The gameplay has been widely praised, especially for its level design, combat mechanics, and tone. But while the game itself has earned acclaim, its physical release has sparked a very different kind of conversation, one rooted not in design, but in delivery. In fact, the physical release of this title doesn't even include the actual game itself, but instead on the PlayStation 5, for example, the retail disc contains just 85 megabytes of data that allows players to download the game. As a result, many physical collectors and those who'd like to have a hard copy of what they paid for are rightly perturbed. What's worse is that this, of course, isn't the first time something like this has happened. Other recent releases have also shipped with empty discs or skipped physical editions entirely. But with Doom, this has manifested in a more disappointed response than usual, which raises a few key questions. How has this release decision affected the perception of an otherwise well-received title? Why are publishers taking this approach at all? And perhaps most importantly, why are so many players reacting so strongly to what on the surface may seem like a technicality? So join me today as we explore each of these questions in turn, placing Doom within a wider industry context, drawing from precedent, and examining why this anti-consumer practice is becoming increasingly common. I am Lady Decade. If you like deep dive gaming discussions, then hit subscribe, as this is the big problem with Doom the Dark Ages. Considering how slow the first portion of the year felt in gaming, we have been spoiled with some recent decent offerings as of late. This of course includes the amazing Expedition 33, the must-play French-produced RPG, which I can get you 43% off. I can also offer you 38% off the top-tier Fatal Fury City of the Wolves, 21% off the excellent Doom the Dark Ages, and so many others. Get money off thousands of different titles by using my links below. Happy shopping, and I hope you enjoy this video. All of the deals I've just mentioned are, of course, digital, which comes with its own set of conveniences. However, it is with physical media that we are becoming increasingly shafted with recently. As I covered at the beginning of this upload, the PlayStation 5 edition of Doom the Dark Ages only includes 85 megabytes of data. Sure, the Xbox version holds slightly more, about 324 megabytes in fact, but in either case, is there enough data to install or run the game without an internet connection? Essentially, these discs don't contain the game you actually paid for when you opt to go physical. They instead just function as a license check that initiates a download from online servers. But I know what you're thinking, right? Modern games are just too big to fit on discs anymore, but with that one, I call bullshit. This isn't some tragic technological limitation. PlayStation 5 discs can hold up to 100 gigabytes of data each. And back in the PS1 era, 4-disc games were standard practice. I mean, Final Fantasy VIII, anyone? That was barely 2 gigs total, spread across 4 discs just to accommodate cutscenes and voice clips. So if a modern game was genuinely 400 gigabytes, which let's be honest, most aren't, you could absolutely ship it across 4 100 gig Blu-ray discs. But nobody does that. Why? Because it's not about space, it's about control and cost-cutting measures in favour of everyone but the consumer. The choice to include nothing except for a minimal launcher isn't about what's possible, it's about what's cheaper, faster, or more convenient from a production standpoint. And while this strategy may be logistically efficient, it fundamentally changes what a physical game actually is. It's no longer a product you own. It's a permission slip to download data that may or may not exist in 10 years. And in this case, it's particularly egregious because Doom the Dark Ages is being marketed as a single-player, complete experience. Not a live service title, not an always online ecosystem, not a seasonal battle pass treadmill, just a campaign, a one and done demon slaying campaign. So there is zero good excuse to provide us with an empty disc. We've seen similar approaches recently with Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, which shipped with just under 70 megabytes on the disc, barely enough space for a JPEG of Captain Price, or Alan Wake 2, which didn't get a physical release at all. But Doom's case has reignited the conversation, perhaps because the disconnect between the quality of the game and the emptiness of the disc is so stark. It's not just disappointing, it feels insulting. A massive shame, as the game, in my opinion, is great. So I get that some people just shrug and say, well, most people buy digital now anyway, so what's the problem? And yes, it's true, digital sales have overtaken physical ones in many regions, mostly because of convenience, but that doesn't make this conversation irrelevant. If anything, it makes it more urgent. Physical editions still matter. They let players collect, gift, resell, preserve, and most importantly, play their games without relying entirely on a corporate server somewhere across the globe. They were supposed to be the reliable alternative, and more than that, when you walk into a shop and pay full price for a physical game, there's a fair expectation that you're buying the actual game, not a 70 megabyte launcher, not a download token, not a blank disc in a fancy box. That's not a format shift. That's a bait and switch. It changes the entire terms of the transaction. You thought you were buying a product, but what you really got was permission, and only for as long as the infrastructure holds up. So sure, digital distribution may be dominant now, but that doesn't give publishers a free pass to quietly strip physical editions of their value while still charging full price. The issue isn't that digital games exist, the issue is that physical is being redefined behind our backs, subtly, silently, and without any clear disclosure. What used to be a complete self-contained product is now often nothing more than a glorified receipt in a plastic case. And for a lot of players, that really matters. There's also a practical issue that goes beyond principle. Not everyone has fast, stable internet. In plenty of places, people deal with slow speeds, data caps, or patchy service. So when a physical game demands a 85 gigabyte mandatory download just to run, it doesn't just feel dishonest, it actively locks people out. What was supposed to be the most accessible, reliable way to own a game now excludes part of the audience by design, which frankly should be considered unacceptable. Whatever happened to respecting the people who allow you to produce what you do? Speaking of showing respect to the legends who make it possible for me to keep making gaming content, I'm wearing this Misa cosplay from Death Note today to mourn the slow, painful death of physical media. And I do wonder how a model with Shinigami eyes and a Death Note would react after witnessing this kind of anti-consumer behaviour from massive corporations. Would she act on sheer impulse or wait patiently for Light Yagami to pass moral judgment first? Either way, I wouldn't want to be in a boardroom right now. This outfit was chosen and paid for by the amazing people who back this show over on Patreon, and as a thank you, I've uploaded a massive behind-the-scenes photo set of this cosplay, now part of my ever-growing collection of exclusive costume shoots, which are all accessible over there. If you want to help shape the future episodes of this channel and see the fun extras that don't make it to YouTube, you can join us there too. Links in the description, and trust me, you'll be in very good company. But let's get back on track. To understand how we ended up here, we need to look at the broader economic forces shaping the industry. During the COVID-19 pandemic, gaming exploded. With millions stuck indoors, video games became the go-to source of entertainment. Revenue skyrocketed, engagement soared, and publishers responded with a hiring frenzy, ballooning development pipelines and business plans built on the assumption that this boom was the new normal. But of course, it wasn't. As life returned to something resembling normality, player engagement dipped, predictably. The problem? Many companies had already scaled up as if the pandemic surge would last forever, so when reality set in, they found themselves overextended, desperate to keep shareholders happy in a market that was no longer so forgiving. Cue cost-cutting, cue monetization schemes, cue physical editions that cost the same but give you less. A recent BBC article titled Doom, one of gaming's oldest series, reckons with the challenges of 2025, explores how Doom the Dark Ages reflects those pressures. It's not just a game, it's a case study in how premium titles are now being positioned in a market dominated by subscription models, price sensitivity, and the need to appeal to both loyal fans and new audiences. And it reveals that even a project designed to resist current industry trends can't fully escape them. The article highlights that executive producer Marty Stratton and director Hugo Martin have been candid about Doom the Dark Ages' intent. It was built to offer a focused, replayable campaign that fits within modern players' time constraints, a deliberate alternative to the forever games that dominate today's charts. Unlike titles like Fortnite or Roblox, Doom avoids live service mechanics and presents itself as a single purchase experience. Stratton has also defended the £69.99 price tag, pointing out that, adjusted for inflation, premium game prices have remained relatively stable since the early 2010s. But even a traditionally structured game like Doom isn't immune to the economic realities of 2025. The BBC article includes commentary from analyst Rhys Elliott, who notes that publishers are increasingly experimenting with pricing models, surcharges, early access tiers, and variable editions. Doom itself illustrates this trend. While it's available via Game Pass, access to early content and bonus features requires an additional £34.99. The core game was intact, but full access came with conditions. Another example of how value is being repackaged in subtle ways. This tension, the divide between the game's design and business model surrounding it, sits at the heart of the controversy. Doom the Dark Ages may reject the live service format in its gameplay, embracing a more old-school campaign-driven structure, but the way it's being packaged and sold, that's a different story. Because despite its retro sensibilities, Doom still features many of the hallmarks of predatory, American-produced AAA games, including the shifting definition of what complete even means. The business model wrapped around the game echoes the same cynical strategies used to wring more revenue from players, regardless of how focused or classic the gameplay might feel. It's that disconnect between what's being sold and how it's being sold that has people talking, and rightly so. The developers themselves may be pushing back against industry trends in spirit, but the release strategy still reeks of a risk-averse market doing what it always does: cutting corners where it can. Nowhere is this more obvious than in the treatment of the game's so-called physical edition. Of course, manufacturing discs isn't free. There's mastering, printing, packaging, shipping, and quality control. For publishers trying to slash overheads, each step is a chance to save money, and by including only a bare-bones launcher file, they can start disc production earlier, well before the final build is finished. No need to delay or repress for late-stage patches. It's efficient, it's cost-effective, but when that same disc is sold at full price as a physical release, you're left with a product that's wildly disconnected from what the box claims to be. And that disconnect has real consequences. Traditional physical media gave players autonomy. A stub disc strips that away. It creates dependency, not just for multiplayer or updates, but for basic access. What you buy is no longer a game, it's just a temporary license to be allowed to play something. And what is even worse is that this isn't just a logistical shift, it's a philosophical one. And we've seen it before. Back in 2013, Microsoft announced that the Xbox One would require a constant internet connection and would lock physical discs to individual user accounts. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Gamers were appalled, with thousands announcing on social media that they would boycott the brand, and they meant it. Media outlets slammed the move as anti-consumer, and Sony twisted the knife with a now iconic video showing how to share a PlayStation game. Simply hand it to a friend. And the impact? Undeniable. The PlayStation 4 went on to absolutely dominate the generation, outselling the Xbox One by tens of millions of units. Gamers spoke with their wallets, and Microsoft paid the price. But the ideas didn't die. Microsoft may have backtracked, but the core philosophy simply retreated, waiting. And now it feels like they've just been biding their time, waiting for the market to shift, waiting for digital to become the norm, waiting for resistance to soften. And when we look at how many people are tending to passively accept these anti-consumer practices now, it appears that Microsoft are eventually getting what they wanted all along. Today, restrictions over access to games that we pay for aren't being rolled out through bold policy announcements, they're creeping in through shifting business models. Physical media is being hollowed out, ownership is being redefined, and access is increasingly controlled by infrastructure and service agreements, not by a one-time purchase. This is the horrifying dystopia we now live in. Subscription services like Game Pass and PlayStation Plus started out looking like a win for players. Affordable, expansive, and convenient, but they didn't stay that way. Prices have crept up, sometimes more than once in a single year. Features have been sliced into confusing tiers, and what was once a simple player-friendly deal has become a nickel and dime labyrinth. And all of it reinforces the bigger trend, a steady drift away from actual ownership. Games rotate in and out based on licensing deals, access is tied to ongoing payment, and if your subscription lapses, so does your entire library. There's no disc, no backup, no permanent record of your transaction. What used to be a purchase is now a rental dressed up to look like progress. Taken together, these trends, cost-cutting, digital dependency, and subscription fragmentation paint a clear picture. This isn't an industry chasing innovation, it's one tightening its grip. The Doom the Dark Ages controversy isn't just about one game or one disc. It's a symptom of something much bigger, a creeping sense that the very foundations of gaming, ownership, collectability, long-term access are being quietly dismantled. And for many players, that's where the frustration begins. For decades, physical games represented permanence. A disc or cartridge meant you owned a complete, playable, functional copy, something you could store, lend, replay, or resell. It wasn't just packaging, it was a guarantee, a promise that what you bought was yours. But Microsoft and other companies like them are breaking that promise, and it's not just their direct consumers who are being hurt via these disgusting practices. There are long-term consequences too. Particularly when it comes to game preservation. Physical media has historically been the backbone of archival efforts. The reason we can still play, study, and celebrate games from decades ago. But if discs no longer contain actual code, they're worthless as archives. Once the service is shut down, the storefronts close, or support is pulled, those discs become little more than hollow souvenirs. This isn't some distant or abstract concern, it's happening right now. Games are routinely delisted from digital storefronts. Online services are shut down. Hardware generations come and go, and without a complete version in circulation, Doom the Dark Ages, like so many modern titles, risks disappearing not because it's outdated, but because of how it was packaged. It's no wonder the backlash has been so fierce. Increasingly, buying a physical game doesn't feel like you own anything. It feels like you're borrowing it, and the terms can change at any time. Some argue this is just how modern gaming works, that digital has overtaken physical and publishers are simply following consumer demand. Others point out that the game still plays, download complete, the servers are up, and technically the experience is there. And sure, those points aren't wrong, but they do completely miss the real concern. The problem isn't that digital distribution exists, it's that physical media is being quietly redefined without transparency, while still being sold under the illusion of permanence. Discs are priced like full products. They look and feel like traditional releases, but in practice, they've become little more than gateways to online infrastructure. Infrastructure the player doesn't own, can't control, and has no guarantee will be there in the future. When the format stops matching the function, trust breaks down. Consumers begin to question what they're actually buying and how long they'll be able to access it. These aren't hypothetical concerns. They're grounded in reality, with the big publishers increasingly blurring the definition of what a purchase even means. What makes this especially infuriating in Doom's case is that the game itself gets so much right. It's a focused, complete single-player experience. No battle passes or loot boxes and no manipulative engagement hooks. It's exactly the kind of game players claim to want, yet it's wrapped in a release model that quietly undermines everything it stands for. But of course, Doom is far from the only game guilty of this across the industry. We're seeing the same tactics creeping in. Nintendo, for example, has started selling game keycards, physical boxes containing nothing but a download code. You still have to insert the card to play, but there's no actual game data on it. No archival value, no offline fallback, just another way to simulate ownership while taking it away. Meanwhile, standard edition prices are rising, discs ship with incomplete builds, stub launchers or nothing at all. The packaging still says physical, but what you're buying is increasingly just a license to access whatever version happens to be live on a server that day. What a bunch of arseholes! Subscription services are now delivering less value to the end user too. As I mentioned earlier, Game Pass and PlayStation Plus were once praised for their affordability and generous libraries, now featuring tiered prices and rising consumer costs. And if that wasn't enough, we're already seeing the early signs of advertisements creeping into paid tiers, just like video streaming, where paying a monthly fee no longer guarantees an uninterrupted experience. And these aren't isolated shifts, they're part of a broader, calculated realignment in how games are packaged and sold. Less about ownership, more about access. Less permanence, more permission. A model that used to be defined by a disc and a one-time purchase has morphed into a tangle of conditions, restrictions, and recurring fees. And this is what the backlash to Doom the Dark Ages is really about. It's not just anger over an 85 megabyte disc, it's about the growing dissonance between the game itself and the system delivering it. Even when a title does everything right creatively, the business model still manages to subtract value. This isn't about nostalgia for discs or lining up game cases on a shelf like I do all day, every day. It's about transparency, it's about knowing what you're paying for and being able to trust that what's in your hand actually contains what it promises. It's about preserving the ability to replay, revisit or share a game on your terms, not the publisher's. And this isn't even just about Doom, that's the whole point. Even if a game this focused, polished and respectful of the player's time can be released in a way that strips away ownership and permanence, then the issue isn't isolated, it's systemic. This isn't a one-off misstep, it's a glimpse at where the industry is quietly headed. Because if players are willing to accept this new version of physical media, discs with no data and boxes with no game, products that only act as permission slips, then publishers have no incentive to change course. Ownership becomes obsolete, preservation becomes accidental, and games shift from being something you own to something you merely rent, until the infrastructure changes or your access runs out. That's why this matters. Not because Doom failed as a game, because it didn't, but because if even this is what release strategies look like now, then no game is safe. And if nobody pushes back, then this becomes the new normal that our corporate overlords wanted. Don't forget, we've been absolutely spoiled lately with some brilliant releases. That does include the phenomenal Expedition 33, a must-play French-produced RPG, which you can currently grab with 43% off using my link. I've also got you covered with 38% off the top tier Fatal Fury City of the Wolves and 21% off the excellent Doom the Dark Ages, and discounts on thousands of other titles all down below. Or if you want to support what I do in a more personal way, access my behind the scenes cosplay library and more over on Patreon. I'll see you all again soon.